Hi, and welcome back to our reading of The Red Lion by Maria Szepes. It's been a long journey. We have encountered our protagonist through this book in many incarnations over several hundred years. If you will, in each one he has worn a different habit, many different appearances. It's as if he has worn all these different coats. Get my drift? And seen the world through all these different lenses. Each different manifestation being something, the illusion of which he would have to work his way through. But one thing has remained the same, and that is his soul, as it has progressed through each incarnation. And unlike most of us, the soul of Cornelius or Hans Burgner, especially if you remember back to the early chapters, he would remember where he had been, what he'd been through on the astral plane. He would see the demons and the entities and everything that was trying to derail him from finding the truth and finding his true path. I would say thankfully, for most of us, thankfully, that we are given this veil of forgetfulness, that we, unlike this soul, the soul of Hans Burgner or Cornelius, we don't remember everything that we have done, and we don't remember everything we have experienced in the astral plane, all the traumas, everything we have encountered in between incarnations. And yet we have this pull, this inner knowing that there's more to us than just this flesh form. This is the final reading. The final chapter was, in the previous reading, was chapter 45, called The Circle Completed. In this one is the Postscript. It's called the Opus Magnum. The soul of Hans Burgner is finally redeemed, and he's in the future. He was working on ever since he realized he made that first terrible mistake of killing his teacher in the beginning of the book. And he paid the price, and he's had his victory. So that's why we're here. So let's see if we can have our victory today. Postscript, Opus Magnum. I found myself stumbling down a steep tunnel. There was a dim pentagram of light in front of me. As I got closer, I saw it was a star-shaped opening that led to a staircase. There was a soothing fragrance in the air, a light blue mist that lulled me into semi-consciousness as I moved slowly on. It was a joyous, mystic fragrance that resonated through my soul in melody and idyllic colors. I felt I had always known that melody, and the delicate kaleidoscope of pastels was dear and familiar to me. The corridor I was now traversing led to a small rock-carved room where the astral double of my body lay unconscious on a stone bench. The mist came from a vessel on the sacramental pedestal. Here it seemed to give both fragrance and light. Then I heard the Master's voice beside me. "Cornelius, wake up!" My dizziness was gone, and my soul surged with weightlessness and joyous freedom. The little room widened and became a fantastically huge columned hall. I looked back at the stone bench. My astral body lay motionless, and I saw behind it in the middle distance my physical body crushed on the soiled bed. I turned away and looked about me. The pastel curtains of many alcoves opened, and I saw quiet, smiling faces, faces unknown, but familiar. Rows of alcoves mounted to inconceivable heights till they became hazy in the distance. Marveling, I looked to the finials of the columns. They reached to the starry horizon, and beyond them I could see only the peaks of the snowy mountains, white arrows pointing to heaven. The beauty of the place overwhelmed me. Focusing on these heights, I gradually made out the angular lines of monastic cities sheltered among the peaks. I could hear the mournful Tibetan bone horn and the festive sistra. Now I knew I stood in the spiritual equivalent of the Order's Hall of Initiation, and the mountains were the spiritual Tibet, true wisdom towering invisibly over the primitive sectarian masses. The Master called again. Now I saw him. He wore the saffron garb of the monk with shaven head. A form moved behind him. Obviously, he still lived embodied among men. Here he appeared in its refined semblance. Motioning me closer, he stretched out his right hand over my astral figure, speaking the eternal formula of the ancient mysteries. Burn thy body with the fire of thy thoughts. The astral form began to glow as though in a furnace and burned with a blinding white brilliance. Now he recited the Lord's word in the book of Ezra. They perish like vapor, like the flame and the smoke thereof. They are kindled and extinguished. Turning to me, he continued, But thou hast burned and been extinguished to form a fire-tempered jewel. Lapido rubro. The initiates did not choose unworthily. One of the just has returned. Triumphant bells and trumpets proclaimed transcendental festivity over the hazy heights, but the voice of the Magus soared over all. The transitory form has turned to ashes, the shadow has become light. Living gold was born from this fire. The Opus is finished, and the great arcanum is before thee, my Lord. The work is perfected. Rejoice, ye sons of light, let the immortal gates be opened, and the veil which covers the eyes of men be stricken. The Magus has been acknowledged by the elemental spirits as their master. He has arrived. May the Lord and only life bless the one who returns to him. I stood in the white glow of completion, dissolved into the flowing melody of the divine masterpiece. Faces, sounds, colors, and places showed me their true form. I saw the masters of the order, some hidden on the earth in hermetic abodes where they could close their lives to glittering illusion and be flooded with the light of infinity. Others were already in the spirit, besieging the frozen darkness of human existence to prepare the future golden age. I saw the guardians and teachers, instruments of the divine forces, the ecstatic seers and preachers of the word. Then there were the scattered fragments of the divine plan, those who blindly persevered through torment, and I saw the Lord of the earth, Adonai, leaning with solicitous love over the flaming crucible of the earth, with its wailing in horror, hate, and rivers of blood and tears. He tended the fire to keep it burning so it would boil away all the impurities, so that after the feverish crisis of the end of time, the planet might be raised in the cosmos. I also saw the people who had been important in my own life's radius in order that all the uncertainty of time would be dispelled. Amadeus Bar was a teacher in a saffron robe, bearing the signs of the order. His disciples sat around him on a rocky plateau, the roof of the world, to which they had climbed by the sufferings of millennia. Among those disciples was a skinny, bright-eyed boy, the Milanese Marietta, who had once given me birth and had done more for me than anyone else even after her death. Her soulmate, my father Francesco Bori, was with her. Now they were companions without the bondage of sex. Poor sentimental Sophie Pétion still hid in the dim arcades of a convent, her life a round of candles, incense, fear, shivering penances, and the aching demands of her flesh. Though she prayed and tortured herself, her body defeated her time and again, and incubi appeared in her dreams. Her being was still riddled with superstitions and nightmares, but her naive faith remained and was leading her out of the chaos. I knew this with radiant certainty, and her present circumstances did not rouse anxiety or pity. I knew her life would soon be resolved as mine had been. The more she suffered, the stronger she would become. Dr. Pellock's path was already smooth like that of all those who demand nothing for themselves. Whether in Paris, England, or Germany, he healed and learned without prejudice or inhibition. He used his powers of observation, memory, and the intuition to give to others, and, though he made no efforts on his own behalf, the ties of karma fell from him. He became one of the just. I also saw the sin-laden figures of Le Pitre and Rosalie. The human mind could never have conceived their tragic new relationship as a poor washerwoman and her neurotic, invalid son. They had had a great deal of difficulty in achieving rebirth and had simply revolved for a long time in the astral ocean. Finally, Rosalie achieved birth and her cell gave birth to her idolized victim. The ironic justice of karma. For now, Rosalie had given him her own blood in place of that she had spilled, and he had dim memories of nameless guilt that led him to torture his mother daily and make her life a living hell. Le Pitre's disease also was a fitting punishment of karma. He was anemic, and his mother would have given him the last drop of her blood to cure him. The son she worshipped was the only meaning of her life. She drudged willingly for the flabby, unhappy youth whom she had borne illegitimately, yet he was slowly dying. His life was being drained, quietly and steadily, just as it had the night she had opened his veins. For Rosalie had not been an ordinary murderess. The fruit of her vindictive passion was returned to her in this way. Charlotte Bruggendorf wandered in the maze of passion as a bisexual gnome, a crippled outcast of unrestrained sexual curiosity. Her husband, the fat mayor of Straubing, was a clumsy charlatan and fairground swindler. He was ever the dilettante, a borrower of reflected light. The Marquis of Brandenburg-Ausbach had come to hate and condemn his former actions after a few short lives. He was always careful to conform, yet somehow he always managed to bring the anger of irresponsible authority upon himself. He was executed 3 times, once because of a careless word, once because he happened to witness a crime, and once because he was thought to have a valuable secret. It was this final execution that moved me most. He was gradually entombed in a tower, leaning over a precipice. The opening through which he was given food and water was slowly filled, and every day they shouted the question to which he had no answer. Despite his pleading, he was finally entombed. He scrabbled at the rocks till his fingers bled, then wrote his innocence in his own blood. This tower was really a sealed well in the sky, the inverted image of the well where Hans Burgner reached the lowest point of his path. Then I saw the women who had first given me birth, the mothers of Hans Burgner and Heinz Knotek, as they developed with the experiences of various lives and circumstances. Hans Burgner's lecherous and whimsical mother went through several lives on the stage and in the circus. Then, after 230 years, she attracted the attention of a ruling prince. By now, she was calmer and more refined, but she was also more daring and had developed her pretense into an art form. Yet her uncontrolled self-love always made her obese. Time and again she would start with an enchanting form, only to become a gigantic mountain of flesh. This flesh weighed her down, yet it served as a barricade to further downward paths. Obesity served as her guardian, torturer, and teacher. She fought against it in vain, for she had never learned self-control. Periodically, she would go on a starvation diet, but this was always broken by compulsive gluttony. To forget her misery, she began to drink and lost the prince's favor. He gave her a modest annuity on which she lived amid covered mirrors, drunk and crying, a prey to her servants. Heinz Knotek's mother blossomed beautifully. The hard-working, simple, and good creature thought clear, bright thoughts and had original ideas she kept to herself for a long time. It is the quiet who truly observe others and hear more than those who love the sound of their own tongue. She had known there was a great discrepancy in the words and actions of her drunken husband, but she did not judge him. She had listened to the murderous quarrels about kindness, the venomous battles about love, and the impatient demands for patience. Yet she never judged or tried to measure imperfect persons against the perfect Christ. Hers was a pure and discriminating spirit, and her new incarnations were fitting garb for it. She was reborn in England, Sweden, and in France, always in an environment where she could receive a good education and develop her talents. Wherever she was a center of spiritual activity, giving and warming those about her. The attention she never sought always came to her. Though she was modest, she was always preeminent. Her French sonnets are still considered some of the finest gems of literature. They have been translated into many languages because of their beauty and immortality. The preacher Knotek wandered through all the sects and filled each one with his personal malevolence. When his bad heart killed him in 1570, his fanaticism drove him to Russia. Here he was the son of a Greek Orthodox priest who himself became a militant priest, feared and hated. This treacherous servant of Christ scandalized his parishioners not only by his drunken debauchery, but also by his extraordinary cruelty. It was his greatest pleasure to incite pogroms and take a personal part in them. In this life, he died relatively young from syphilis. Next, he became a Muslim. He snatched up the Prophet's banner like a spear and joyously killed Christians with it. The Koran was now his bludgeon. The holy books have ever been helpless and patient in the hands of bigoted fools. He kept the Prophet's rules just as he had kept the Christian commandments, endlessly scrutinizing words and letters while his whole soul and body sinned against their spirit. Finally, he died in a quote-unquote holy war. Then he was reborn in Russia, in the ghetto where he had gloried in so many pogroms. Now he was a part of the suffering of this strange people with their great and terrible fate. Again he became a religious fanatic, transcribing the Talmud and the Torah. He learned to hate his persecutors, but he also learned what it was to be defenseless against fanaticism, living with fear and the leaden horror of murder. He heard the futile pleas of his fellow Jews and watched the executioners turn a deaf ear to the screams of dying children. This bitter life of the perpetual fugitive filled him with a thirst for revenge. Finally, he was tortured to death during a pogrom, unaware that he himself had killed a defenseless Jew by those same tortures more than 100 years before. Then the man's dark force was used where the logic of events demanded, in France, just before the revolution. A firebrand of the revolution, he was able to consummate all his hatred and make his name infamous. But the forces he had conjured up swept him away with them. Before he could complete his killing, he himself fell to the guillotine. Giuseppe Balsamo had been executed in the Castel Sant'Angelo in 1795. Condemned as a Freemason and a heretic. All his efforts to prove he was not Cagliostro had been in vain. He had lied so consistently that no one believed the only truth he had ever uttered. When he had insisted that he was the illegitimate son of a peasant woman who had taken the name Cagliostro to impress people, they only laughed. There were witnesses to testify and date paintings, and even the date and place of his birth were against him. Everyone wondered why he had told such a clumsy lie. But I also saw where Balsamo's frightful death would lead him, the direction determined as early as his meeting with Saint Germain. The magic warning remained in his thoughts during his terrible torment, and sowed the seed of something he had never known before, faith and fear. He began to believe in the supernatural powers and fear the consequences of his actions. Thus he learned his first moral inhibitions and began to have ambitions in the direction he had once scorned. His meeting with Saint Germain had started him from his lowest point, and Cagliostro's name turned his mind to white magic. Meanwhile, Jean Girard and Lorenza Feliciani, who were different incarnations of the same soul, whose ties with Balsamo were far deeper than those of the flesh, spent her days in ecstatic prayer in a convent. She surrendered her will completely to a forceful and bigoted mother superior, who formed her into a flaming prayer mill. Lorenza confessed her faults, and Balsamos endlessly, blaming herself for all, and begged salvation. She had truly loved her husband despite her terror of him. Once in her dreams she saw him on the torture rack, reduced to a whimpering stump. Lorenza could not forget the vision, which she felt in her soul was true. From then on she forgot her fear and wept bitterly over him. Really, these two could not exist without each other. Lorenza needed Balsamo's strength and will, and he needed her receptive intuition. Balsamo had always turned her spiritual eyes and ears toward hell, but now in his misery he was turning toward higher things. As for Ernst Müller, he was destroyed immediately by the red lion, which he had mixed with wine and drunk greedily on the night of the murder. The tremendous force broke his will and consumed his decomposing body. No longer could his personality be torn apart by demons. He had crashed into the innermost astral hell, an unprepared living being just like Hans Burgner. I saw the ebb and flow of the lives and their driving force and meaning, the justice that reconciled their miseries. In this solemn moment, I saw that grotesque actions proceed from grotesque and sick minds, and that these actions themselves produce the painful fruit that cures the disease. It is only transgression that can produce the healing, and there is never more suffering than is absolutely necessary. Then a voice rang out, the voice of Uriel, who sends out the word to the beings in the cosmos. It is Uriel who directs the divine light into a live flame in the souls of the Messiahs and the seers. What a voice it is, the sound of all holiness and revelation. I salute you who have arrived, Magus of the three worlds. At last you have untied your bonds. You have withdrawn your personal forces from the rule of matter, and now you may use them as you wish. Determination binds you no longer, for you know the secret gates, and the keys are in your hand. Nowhere do physical laws bind you still. You can go where your spirit wills and create what it desires. If you wish, you may create worlds and become a titan of the galaxies. You may build your own paradise of sublime artistry. Its flowers will wither only at the end of time. You may visit the most marvelous planets and the mysterious realm of Hades. You may penetrate that which is large and that which is small, and perform majestic experiments until the manifest world returns to God. Or you may depart alone on the straight path which you know and leave all transitory illusion, even the illusion of paradise. You may leave this cosmic crucible of suffering and experiment, for you are indeed free. Because of your freedom, I give you one more choice, a difficult one. I offer you a mission. You do not need to accept and will suffer no penalties if you refuse. If you accept, you will return as a servant to live through a messianic age, a terrible and magnificent time when the old eon will die and a new one come into being. The cataclysm of death will be mixed with the agony of birth and the mystery of resurrection. You will have to wait many earthly years in anonymity unknown to the world. Then will come the time when the star appears while Saturn is in conjunction with Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. The cosmic gate, which admits only him who is sent, will open. Only Hermes Trismegistus, Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Moses, Lao Tzu, Zoroaster, Mohammed, and Christ have entered through this gate. Now someone will follow them. It will be your duty to announce him, to chronicle the truth, to preserve the traditions of the past and weave them into the present and the future. You will record your own life and how it has been imbued with the transcendental restlessness of occult force.
Your life will be a window of eternal light to people in deepest darkness. Many thousands of years ago, I predicted this to Ezra in Babel and told him the signs that must first appear. If you take the task, you will see it. All the chosen ones present as the beginning will be present at the end, that the number of the just shall be full from Abraham to Abraham.
These are those who have gathered strength and never tasted death. You will also see the deepest hell, the most terrible suffering, the greatest lie, and the most terrible crimes. The sky will be darkened, brother will betray brother, and friend will fight friend. Innocents will be massacred, and the law and the truth destroyed. Every value of the human spirit will be defamed, and hell will triumph over the earth. You will have to endure all this and stand firm in the midst of desolation, hatred, dangers, and threats. It is your mission to write about God and the new Messiah of the Spirit and the new eon to be born from the decay of evil. You must write to the accompaniment of the trumpets of the apocalypse, while the sky is rent asunder and the earth opens in death and flame. You must be ready for the appointed hour, for the book of life can be fulfilled only with the sound of the orchestra of death. The song of resurrection soars only from destruction. Choose. There was a silence after these words, the silence of a listening infinity. Every creative possibility silently offered itself to me, with no lurking traps. The universe was an open plain in all directions, with the vast starry heavens round about. These were the ancient forces gathered in Lilith's womb to be commanded by the creative spirit. I saw the mysterious gates of Hades glimmering below, promising fulfillment of all mysteries. The macrocosmos and microcosmos drew me toward them, and the miserable earth, drifting toward the crises, awaited the Messiah. Now, after years of anonymity, I have returned to announce him. Rejoice, for a star has risen. A liberator hath come forth from the deepest darkness. He announceth the reign of the Spirit, the invisible kingdom. He came to defeat death with life. The circle soon closeth. Be ye watchful. And this is the circle from Abraham to Abraham. Hasten into the narrow path while it is yet open. Hasten unto the new eon, that ye be not locked out in outer darkness.
Make haste. The number of the just is about to be fulfilled, for the signs which were spoken have appeared. The chasm of agonies and the way of resurrection, behold, they are before us. Hasten, for few of those remain who bear the holy name and number. As for the others, they shall perish. They perish like vapor, like the flame and the smoke thereof. They are kindled and extinguished.
Wow. That is the end of the Postscript. I want to make quick mention that this was written in the 40s about a soul that was reincarnating and having his initiations from the 14 to 1800s. In the 1900s, we were given a new dispensation where we no longer need to balance 100% of our karma in order to make our ascension.
We can make our ascension if we fulfill all the other requirements as well. If we just balance 51% of our karma, which is hard enough. But Cornelius had to balance the last jot and tittle of his karma, which is why the actual deed he had done when we first met him in this book of killing his teacher, the alchemist, had to come back to him as that exact measure of his own misdeed.
And today we can use the violet flame given to us by Saint Germain, who we got to know pretty well in this book. And there are other requirements, but I will leave that to your own studies. So, let us read the introduction that Maria Szepes wrote for the book, which is interesting, showing how she wrote it during World War II. Introduction. In my introduction, I would like to recount for the reader the events that led me to write this book and how, like a magnet attracts iron filings, the subject drew me into its power. I most prefer to speak about the Red Lion in the third person because it has taken on a completely independent and wondrous life. It has a fate of its own now. I will not claim that the fact that I am a born writer was not a prerequisite for its genesis. I have worked with almost every literary genre since I was 8 years of age. I let my mind, my imagination wander and needed only to have historical and scientific sources of inspiration to come my way. Still, I felt that I was only a tool, a medium for a force greater than myself. Call it inspiration, although I do not know if that is the fitting term, but I know that it does have a name. If I had guessed what a sea of flames was about to catch fire just as I began writing in 1939, I would not have had the courage to go through with it. In 1939, my little boy died. I was born into a wonderful family, actors, filmmakers, musicians, and writers whose bohemian liberties never meant libertinism, but an open mind and curiosity for art, philosophy, and science. We were not petty bourgeois nor gentries, but we got to know all kinds of people and trends and followed the events taking place in our country and the world. We were aware of the dangers, but we never became attached to any ultra-political movement or party.
My husband, Maria Szepes, an Olympic athlete, graphic artist, caricaturist, and journalist, had worked for both Hungarian and major international papers. He made it possible for me to do all the things I am interested in and to obtain German and English background literature. I have reading proficiency in both languages. At that point, I was into alchemy. I decided to write a short story about one of those fascinating alchemists. I was touched by the tragic fate of these experimenters who had been forced to function in hiding. They were misunderstood by the power-hungry lords, just as were all great minds in our bloody history. The real initiates into mental alchemy were never out to make gold, but to transmute their own being from human dreams to human gold.
They worked to generate the philosopher's stone or portable gold in their very souls and spirits, which was the true elixir of eternal life. When they fell into the hands of omnipotent lords and were unable to fulfill their master's lust for wealth, they were tortured and executed. In the meantime, however, they made countless interesting discoveries as they searched the secrets of nature. Modern science continues to prove that like elements can be changed into other elements through energy by the invention of plastics. We also know that gold and gems, vitamins to unclog our arteries and extend our lifespans, medicines, antibiotics, and serums to conquer epidemics and infections can be produced.
Chemistry is alchemist's offspring. Only it produces arcanums deemed useful but often just as damaging at a much higher financial cost and failure rate than nature's ingenious biomagic, which it is trying to imitate.
The Red Lion's fascinating plot spans 4 centuries, really the history of alchemy, and holds the secret key to Eastern philosophy for those who in several readings will realize how many and always new psycho-archaeological layers they come upon. I remember how I was shaken by the fire that ignited within me when I was writing the book. I came to realize that what was engulfing me this time was not a short story, but an expanse I was catapulted into by some cosmic vehicle and which made me dizzy. I was unable to end this interstellar journey. It extended ever further the more I proceeded. It raised me over the waves of a sea of flames. While I did know the outline of the plot, my pen produced surprising phrases such as I had not conceived of just seconds before. It was a sort of schizophrenia. One part of me filled my imagination with pictures, colors, passions, strangely credible characters which my sound mind considered alarming and shirked away from. She puts sound mind in quotation marks. My God, what is this? What are people going to say? I said to myself. My internal struggle I always countered with my conviction that it would never be published anyway. Writing took 5 years. In Leon Eufalu, the recluse I called Noah's Ark, a neighbor who was an experienced typist noticed the manuscript piling up on my desk in our little room. Until then, I had no idea I was actually a writer. I was simply interested in the subject. The lady suggested I should go to her place and dictate to her. She could type 30 pages a day. We were living the final horrors of war. Budapest was surrounded. The capital, 25 kilometers away, was being razed to rubble.
In the evenings, salvos of red tracer shells pierced the sky, and during the day, thick black smoke hovered over the horizon. Huge blasts shook also our little house. A nearby hit shattered our windows. Explosions pounded our closed doors. We had no idea which of our friends and relatives trapped in the city cellars were still alive or who was killed. Amidst the commotion of air raids, cannon and machine gun fire, in the apocalyptic blare, I dictated and dictated this strange book, 30 pages each day. No one knew it, no one read it, until typing was completed.
Not my husband, nor my brother, parents, or friends, and what I had not thought of, much less hoped for, came true. In the 3 years of freedom that followed, the Red Lion's first edition was published by Hungary in 1946. It became a bestseller. In 1947, the publishing houses were nationalized, and, like all other books in the shops and libraries whose content digressed from the only official ideology, the Red Lion was shredded, which did it a lot of good. The Red Lion is about immortality, and it could not be killed. It rose from the ashes like a phoenix. Raising eternal human questions and offering a solution to them, the Red Lion thus continues on its own designated course to pass on a never outdated message to the contemplative reader in search of spiritual support in a most disquieting era, says Maria Szepes.
Thank you so much for joining me for this final reading of The Red Lion.
Thank you for following me through this journey and through this incredible book. It is my intention to continue with a reading of A Dweller on Two Planets by Phyllis the Tibetan.
And stay tuned. If you are subscribed and hit the bell, you'll know when that happens.
That was a long and treacherous path, but we're finally in the light. Thank you very much.